Story 1. I realized she was mean and judgmental toward me. Story 2. He physically abused his wife. I cut ties with him and supported her and their children. Story 3. A friend became really judgmental. She felt guilty about putting her mother in a nursing home. Then, when I had to place my husband, who had early-onset Alzheimer's, in a care home, she said I was being cruel. It was all about her. I didn't need her judgment on top of having a husband with Alzheimer's in his 50s. It had been an almost 30-year friendship. Story 4. His rock-bottom alcoholism led him to cut everyone and everything off. It has been 30 years. I miss him every day, and I will be here if he ever resurfaces. If only to slap him for making me believe he was dead for 2 years. Story 5. Going behind my back to flirt with and try to be with my man. Girl code is the same as bro code. Story 6. Her husband left her, and I hated him. She cut off everyone she knew before he left and made a whole new group of friends. It broke my heart. Story 7. I realized she was only friends with me for what I had to offer. She went out of her way to do something nice for me once, but she took advantage of my generosity. She was much better off than I was. Story 8. 2 of my friends of more than 20 years, whom I had considered asking to be groomsmen, did not attend my wedding. One declined the invitation without calling or texting to explain. The other did not respond to the save the date or the invitation and sent me a weak excuse by text a week after the wedding. I have not heard from either since. The wedding was 6 months ago. Both are single men with no children and steady jobs, so it was not a matter of time or money. About a year earlier, I realized I had been the one keeping the friendships alive for more than 10 years. As soon as I stopped reaching out, they dropped away. That was the final straw. It is a shame. Story 9. A 25-year friendship. As we got older, I realized that my friend's selfishness was not something he would grow out of. Many young people act without realizing their behavior is selfish or poor judgment, but my friend was the sort of person who would hurt others if it benefited him. It did not register as wrong. His brain simply did not work that way. A few times he had narcissistic meltdowns when confronted about it. I think it is called antisocial personality disorder. My life is much better without him in it. Story 10. It was an almost 50-year friendship. She became increasingly self-absorbed and oblivious to what others were going through. It was always about her. The final straw came when my son, whom she had known all his life, married this past summer. I heard from every single friend that day with congratulations and good wishes. She was upset because she was not invited to the wedding. None of our friends were invited. It was only my brothers and their families, same on the bride's side. She made a point not only of not reaching out to me but also of contacting the bride's mother, whom she barely knew, to prove a point. A couple of weeks later, we had a garden party for the bride and groom, and she said at least a dozen times, "I wish we had been there. We had been friends since middle school, but that was the last straw. Felt like a game, and I'm not in middle school anymore." Story 11. I cannot be around another person for more than 2 hours. I have always struggled, but it became insurmountable and I just ghosted the entire world. Story 12. She used threats of suicide to borrow $10,000 for car repairs, never paid me back, and then ghosted me. That's insane. A good friend is priceless, but she put a price on our friendship. What an asshole. Story 13. On behalf of my wife, her former best friend decided, rather than uninvite us from her son's first birthday party, to hope we would just forget about it. Her husband was a bit of a mama's boy, and his mother had invited too many people, so the guest list had to be cut. Story 14. A complete lack of reciprocity and telling me that I could have depression but chose not to. Knowing I had been hospitalized, had electroconvulsive therapy, and was on many medications. Story 15. 30-plus years of friendship ended when they got into conspiracy theories such as the flat earth idea and the claim that we have never really been to space. Story 16. I don't know. I have lifelong friends who actively stopped inviting me to events and refused to do anything I suggested for almost a decade, so I moved to another city. Story 17. She asked my opinion, and I gave her my honest answer. She had cancer and was responding well to treatment. She was almost finished. She somehow became convinced the cancer had spread and that she would not make it, even though the doctors had done scans. She found a man in California who claimed to be a doctor and offered treatments. He said he had been an executive at a pharmaceutical company and had developed a cure for cancer. He claimed the government had put him out of business because releasing his cure would have collapsed the medical community. None of this could be verified, he said, because the government had destroyed the records. He told her he could still produce the cure in his condominium in Lake Tahoe, California. He said that for $25,000 and toenail clippings from each toe, he could produce his cancer cure. She would have to fly to Lake Tahoe and bathe in his bathtub filled with the treatment water. He was a master con artist. He told my friend she had to do it soon. He said he was leaving the country the following month and would be gone for 2 years, visiting family in the Middle East. I searched for information to help convince her this was a hoax. I found no record of him being a doctor or an executive. I found inconsistent records where he used different names online and nothing indicating he was part of the medical community. I begged her not to do it. Her doctors had almost cleared her of cancer, but she wanted to go because she felt the cancer had spread. Without my knowledge, she sent him the money and the toenail clippings. She told me the day before she was flying to California that she was going. I told her it was a big mistake and that he had conned her. She did not want to hear it. We have not spoken by phone since. She flew to California and bathed in his tub for 3 hours a day for 5 days. The week after she returned, her regular doctor told her she was cured. Her regular doctor did not know about the con artist. She became convinced the treatment worked and that I was a fool. It has almost destroyed me. She and I have known each other for 40 years. She will not talk to me because she is convinced she would have died if she had listened to my advice. Story 18. He repeatedly picked fights with me over inane things. I dealt with it for years until I realized I did not have to be here. I wished him a good life, thanked him for the good times, and blocked him. Story 19. How about 40 years? A super talented kid who played in a ton of bands with us, always a little weird and mercurial, almost bipolar at times, sometimes wildly happy like a puppy, other times grim and dark. He was writing and recording a bunch of music. My wife and I thought of it as Barry Manilow joining Yes. He was always sending me songs to critique and trying to get me to form a band in our 50s. I think he believed agents with cigars were still handing out record deals. He was having a bad night and I was trying to figure out what was wrong, encouraging him to just get out and play or sing. The guy could probably nail most cover or tribute gigs. Perfect pitch, big range. He finally confided that he'd been sexually abused as a child by a family member I knew pretty well, one of the biggest jerks I've ever met. He had a big breakdown, sobbing. I sat up with him for hours, just the two of us. He came out with the story to our closest friends the next day, guys we'd played thousands of gigs with who were visiting. I realized he was facing that he'd been abused, but not facing that it had left him with a deep well of shame and rage. A few months later, he had a huge freakout with me and my wife at 3 a.m. on New Year's Eve. 5 years before, he'd sent me an MP3 audio file of a new song, "All You Set My Soul on Fire." And I'd gone off a little, trying to make it clear we were not compatible to write together. I told him, "You're smarter than that. It's lazy writing. It's a cliche. You can do better." This was years before I knew what was really up with him. He didn't reply to the message, but we still hung out every couple of weekends. He was always single and we'd make dinner. He really loved my wife. 5 years later, he brought up that email and was screaming in my face that he's not lazy, pointing and yelling. He called me arrogant and claimed our best friends agreed and couldn't really stand me, then said, "But I love you guys," and crashed on the couch. The next morning, he was gone. He told my wife that if we didn't hear from him by 10 a.m., we never would again. My buddies started calling, saying he'd called them and told them he'd thrown them under the bus, with some nonsense about them hating me. They were freaked out. We're close, like family. Over the next couple of years, they'd say, "When are you going to reconnect with MC Photo?" He'd say I always tried to undermine him. I had done tons of websites, videos, and photo shoots for him. And then the next week he'd say I only helped him to look cool. Every few weeks his reasons shifted. I'm still not 100% sure what the real deal was. Some friends think he's jealous of my marriage and that I've held on to a creative career. Others say he's just kind of unstable. Casual friends who only knew him the last decade were not surprised and thought he was strange. My wife agrees that we don't really miss him. It could be fraught when we hung out. Like, which guy are we getting tonight? We talk about the person he could be if he ever addressed his trauma. My wife works in trauma care. She has a Doctor of Philosophy degree, practices meditation, and works with the Department of Veterans Affairs and veterans groups. He had a lot of talent, smarts, and was capable of real devotion to his friends. Story 20. They are a hater who could never be happy for me about anything. Story 21. They failed to pay rent to a mutual friend for 3 years. Story 22. Watching a friend I grew up with become addicted to meth, get his girlfriend and eventual wife hooked on it, lose their children, and start pimping her out for drug money was devastating. He then blamed her for leaving him for a man who helped her get sober and eventually regain custody of her children. It all played out on social media for his friends and family to watch over the course of about 2 years. Horrible things were posted during that time. I have no respect for him after the things he said and did. He was always sketchy growing up, but he became a complete piece of shit as an adult. Story 23. His belief that Sandy Hook was a hoax ended a 30-year friendship. Story 24. He relapsed on heroin. I started seeing him on the streets again. I really hope he is doing well and has found his way to sobriety. I could not risk my own recovery. Story 25. It turned out he was involved with child pornography. To this day, I still run things through my head, wondering if I missed something over all those years. Some small hint that this was who he was. I still have nothing. It taught me that you do not always truly know someone. When you see news clips of neighbors saying, "They seem so nice, I never would have thought," you realize it is possible. Story 26. He casually told me that he had sexually assaulted somebody. He did not seem to understand the severity of his actions. He even said he would pay for couples therapy for them to work it out, but they were not even a couple. He had been my best friend and we had played in a band together for years. I just ghosted him after that. I feel bad for not communicating why, but I just could not be around him. Later, his former partner confirmed to me that he was abusive. Story 27. A friend fell into racist and extremist views. Multiple people, including me, tried talking to him to explain why his beliefs were wrong. He went on another tirade a few hours later, citing figures such as Alex Jones. He is now isolated with that crowd. I have not spoken to him in about 8 years. We were friends since around 1997. Story 28. She believed every conspiracy theory during the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. I couldn't take it anymore. She actually cut me off first. We met when we were 10 or 11 and were both, I think, 53 when that friendship ended. Story 29. They said woke mind virus with no irony. They love Trump and Putin, but we live in Australia. Story 30. After I hired him into my company, he robbed my client in the biggest and most embarrassing scandal in my industry. It hurt and ruined my 25-year reputation as he repeatedly claimed we grew up together. He lied to me nearly every day for a year while abusing the trust placed in him as the manager of a location. If he had apologized, resigned, and confessed to my client that he had messed up and harmed them and me, instead of trying to slither and survive at the end, I could have forgiven him personally, though never professionally. His lies in the final week, when the client discovered he had been abusing his position all along, caused more damage than his year of abuse. Still makes me sick and sad. Story 31. I realized we both loved her, but no one loved me. We kept her life private, but no one protected mine. We did a lot for her and made sacrifices to move her life forward, but no one did anything for me. I decided it would be easier to be my own best friend than to wait for her to step up. Story 32. My friend from church and I went in different directions as adults. She became very involved in the church after a frightening time in her life, and I abandoned it completely. It was not a big issue until I got divorced. She stopped talking to me after I told her. I do not understand it because she did not even like my husband, and she was in my wedding. Several people who reacted negatively to my divorce later ended up getting divorced themselves. I think seeing me do it scared them when they were not ready. I am not sure whether that will be the case with this friend. Story 33. It is wild how a 20-year friendship can end just because people grow apart or stop respecting each other. Story 34. Four of us were best friends from kindergarten at 5 years old through our early 40s. Then one of them began a relationship with the ex-girlfriend of another friend. Now no one talks to each other. That was 25 years ago. Story 35. This is about my father. He invited his childhood best friend over to tell him my mother was pregnant with their first child. The friend called my father a sellout because my father had said he never wanted more children or to get married again. Yet he began dating my mother, a single parent, and later they had another child after they married. My father was upset, especially because it was a few months after my parents' wedding, which the friend had refused to attend, so my father told him to leave and never look back. Story 36. One was an accidental death. The other was addiction and unhealthy life choices. I would love to see her healthy again, but she has not been healthy or safe in a long time. On top of that, we are in two very different places in our lives, and I do not know how to bridge that gap. Story 37. I had a 21-year friendship with another woman that began in our early teens. One of our mutual friends decided to try to leave an abusive partner and planned to call her to be his getaway driver because she lived closer and had better security. When he called, she ignored the call so it would not interrupt her impromptu movie night. After that, I knew our priorities were different. Story 38. Voting for or supporting Donald Trump and then lying about it. I had tolerated racist and homophobic behavior for years. I called people out and they stopped saying offensive things around me, but their core beliefs did not change. I do not want anyone in my life who supported any elected official who openly sought to limit other people's rights. Story 39. Trump and the National Conservative Party have cost me half of my Navy buddies. Story 40. I stopped being friends with two of my oldest and closest friends over the past 6 years. One of them hit rock bottom after being charged with driving under the influence and his wife leaving him. He has been in and out of prison for animal cruelty, domestic violence, indecent exposure, public intoxication, and criminal trespassing. My sister obtained a restraining order after he repeatedly sent her pictures of dead cats he had killed and threatened to sexually assault her. In high school, he was voted class favorite. His father is a doctor and his mother runs an animal shelter. They are both wonderful people. We played college baseball together, and he double majored in business and electrical engineering. He used to be a very nice guy who everyone wanted to be around. He had a warmth that was hard to find in most people. Now I would not go anywhere near him. I saw his last mugshot, and the hate and cruelty in his eyes was jarring. I barely recognized him. My other close friend became very involved with Charlie Kirk and now identifies as a conservative evangelical Christian. Nothing dramatic happened, but our worldviews diverged, and we naturally lost touch. I later learned he married while we were still somewhat in contact, and I was not invited, so I did not reach out. That was about 2 years ago. We are all 34 now, and it feels odd not to be connected to someone you were close to since kindergarten. Story 41. She admitted she had used me to fuel her addictions and was surprised when I said I was done. It is sad. I do miss my best friend, but my bank account is grateful for the freedom. Story 42. 30 years of friendship. When 2020 and the protests began, he became a full supporter of Make America Great Again and a hardcore racist. I was deeply disappointed. Story 43. I caught him cheating on his fiancée. He had been my best friend since kindergarten, and I was supposed to stand up in his wedding that coming summer. Far more disappointing than the cheating was his expectation that I ignore it and say nothing, and his cruel response after I told his fiancée the truth. I am glad I learned his true colors when I did. Good riddance. Story 44. I was mentally unwell. I honestly can't even remember what we argued about. I regret it. Story 45. I met a woman and he did not like her. I married her. I think he was jealous as a heterosexual life partner. We have been together for 17 years. I think I made the right decision. Story 46. You were toxic and absolutely relentless. I am sorry that life did not treat you well. Another person fell into the involuntary celibate community and embraced bigotry. I will not tolerate your intolerance. My empathy only goes so far. You will not weaponize my kindness against me. Story 47. She slept with my husband. Now they're both former friends of mine. Story 48. I got unexpectedly pregnant and leaned on her for support. When I told her I did not think I was in a place to keep it, she tried to talk me out of it, saying I would never forgive myself. It is a tragedy, and I think about it every day, but I know I made the right choice. I was in no position to have a baby. We do not talk anymore. Story 49. While I was away at a one-day work conference from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., she agreed to come to my house at midday to walk my beloved elderly dog, and I trusted her to do so. Instead, she went with her girlfriend to a museum in a neighboring state and did not return until about 6 p.m., by which time I was already home and had taken my dog outside. That was it. Story 50. Blind support of January 6th and the lies that accompanied it still anger me. Story 51. His partner was cruel to my partner from the beginning. I had been friends with him for 20 years, and with her for about 10. She has a disability, so we always gave her a pass for her entitled, over-the-top compensatory personality. She could be funny and intelligent, but she had a massive chip on that tiny shoulder, and our friend group let her get away with it. When my new girlfriend joined our group, she was immediately hostile toward her. It all blew up after a minor spat one night when we were out on the town. The others let it go for the moment, but her partner decided to take my girlfriend to task. The first I realized what was happening was when they were suddenly screaming at each other on the sidewalk, and he raised a hand as if to hit her. I'm not sure how I instantly put myself between them, but that's how it felt. We left. My girlfriend, in tears, said, "I don't understand how you're all friends with her. She's horrible and she walks all over you." That felt like an epiphany, because she was spot on. I decided we were done right then and there. The next day there was a sorry that this was all your fault message from them, and that clinched it. I've only seen them a couple of times in the 20 years since. Unfortunately, it split our friend group and I lost or semi-lost some really good friends. But I got a really great wife out of the deal. Story 52. Trump's overt racism was condoned by a former friend. Story 53. Make America Great Again. There is no place for bigotry, racism, homophobia, or similar attitudes in my group of friends. Story 54. After 20 years of friendship, he decided to support Reform United Kingdom and spout their racist, bigoted rhetoric every time we met. The 6 of us in our long-term friend group told him we would not associate with racists, and his wife also decided she did not want to associate with a racist or bigoted person. He has since moved to a new town and joined a white supremacist group. Story 55. I was invited to his house for dinner and asked to sit at the table while he and his family ate, and I watched. Story 56. I broke down over unspoken issues and was told I was never like family, even though I had been led to believe I was family throughout the friendship. Story 57. He was caught sending child sexual abuse material overseas. He had been a friend for 25 years, and I cut him off as soon as I discovered it. Story 58. I've had a really rough year. I have been deeply depressed, stretched very thin, and feeling low. I just wanted to feel cared for, wanted, and needed. I begged my friends for help. 30 minutes of their time sitting in a bar, free trivia on my birthday, and a concert I wanted to attend but did not want to go to alone. I was feeling suicidal and begged them to care about me even a little. Then they said to my face, "Too bad, so sad. We have our own problems." That made me seriously reevaluate the friendships. I'm sorry you are feeling this way. If you are thinking about harming yourself, please contact emergency services now or a crisis hotline. In the United States, call or text 988. If you are elsewhere, contact your local emergency number or a crisis service, and consider reaching out to a trusted person or a mental health professional for support. Story 59. When discussing a school shooting, she said, "Well, the school shouldn't have glass doors." Story 60. Family friends. We always knew they were petty and oversensitive. My parents were fairly good at managing them. Then, right after my father died, when my mother was emotionally at her lowest, they took an innocent comment she made, which multiple witnesses confirmed, as a suggestion that they were racist, and they attacked her. They shouted and became aggressive toward her. She left crying. I used to have playdates with their children. Now, if I ever see them again, I will confront them. I am getting worked up just thinking about it. Story 61. He dumped his girlfriend, who had just received a cancer diagnosis, then began love-bombing her roommate and tried to convince her to evict his ex so he could move in. That was disgusting. I have not spoken to him since. Story 62. Sleeping with his wife. They had been having problems well before. She had never had an orgasm with him. I changed that. Story 63. He loved what Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Elon were doing and believed some teachers were teaching preschoolers. Explicit sexual content involving minors has been removed. I never knew he had gone so far from when we were friends and talked. The person he used to be would have scoffed at the nonsense. Story 64. Best friend went all in on Make America Great Again. I asked if we could each read a book the other recommended and then talk about it. He said, "Frankly, it's not worth it." Story 65. It turned out they were opposed to vaccination during the pandemic. We never spoke again. Story 66. He fell into the QAnon conspiracy movement, accused me of being racist for supporting Black Lives Matter, and cut off his friends and family when they refused, even though many were conservatives, to accept that Trump was the only person who could save America, oust the deep state, have all the pedophiles executed, and be their Lord and Savior. He returned after 2 to 3 years, but we have not talked much since. Story 67. During the year 2000 problem, they believed the government would collapse, so they cut off all contact. Story 68. Drinking changed him. I tried to help for years, but his lying and embarrassing behavior became too much. I warned him that I was at the end of my patience and ready to cut ties if nothing changed. After a few months with no change, I cut off every form of contact. I hope he finds happiness and sobriety. Story 69. I still have no idea. Our friendship started over 30 years ago in my hometown. Even their kids called me Uncle Triple X. When I was going back for vacation, we talked about getting together for lunch, spending a day with the kids, and maybe having dinner at their place. Then there was radio silence. I found myself unfriended on all their social media accounts, with no calls or texts returned. They basically erased me from their lives. Story 70. He was diagnosed with colon cancer in April and died before Halloween. I am not attracted to the same sex, but I truly believe he was my soulmate. I know I will never have that kind of friendship again, but I am so grateful I got to experience it. Story 71. He consistently cheated on his girlfriends and on his current wife. What ended it for me was finding out he slept with his sister-in-law. Also, a few times I had to lie to cover for him. Story 72. My mom had a cancer recurrence. At first, she didn't want treatment because it is hard and she had been through it before. I called my best friend, sobbing. She said that at least I had about 30 good years with her and then moved on. I haven't spoken to her since. Story 73. He went down the red pill rabbit hole. I tried to talk sense into him, but I wasn't going to drive myself crazy over it. I told his wife to think of her children first, and that was the last time I spoke to them. Story 74. I tolerated and found amusement in my friend's eccentric drunken rantings, but when I was helping him look for a place to live, he said, "I don't want to live in the South End, a lower-income area. I want to see white, shiny faces when I go out in the morning." White, shiny faces. That pretty much solidified what I had always suspected. After that, the phone calls between us became increasingly sparse until he left a message saying that a little birdie had told him he should never call me again. 27 years later, I am still not proud of the way I handled that. But there we are. Story 75. She continued trauma dumping on me despite repeated requests to stop. This negatively affected my mental health. Story 76. My sister voluntarily entered the shadow realm. The night I got home from the casket viewing, she texted that she planned to do the same. When I went to her apartment to try to help, She, intoxicated, tried to push me down the stairs. A couple of weeks later, a man texted saying he knew where I lived. As someone who had been stalked, I panicked and broke my toe while frantically closing and locking everything. She was drunk and thought it would be a way to get in touch, so I ended the friendship. Story 77. The Make America Great Again cult lives in the upside down. Sad to see. Story 78. I have a friend who, around 2021, abruptly left our group chat of high school friends and blocked me. I had posted pro-vaccination posts and mocked anti-vaccination people for associating with Nazis. I think this was just before the truckers' freedom convoy in Canada, laughing out loud. It turned out they had gone off the deep end into alt-right conspiracy theories. Story 79. Friends from 13 to 30, so close enough. It was a mixture, but she was dating someone who was ruining her life. He would not work, drained her financially, cheated on her, gave her drugs, yelled at her, encouraged her to drink more, and encouraged her to gain weight, which was a problem since she was well over 400 pounds. She planned to get back together with him, so I gave her an ultimatum. She chose him. This was not the first time. I had spent many years trying to help her, but it became a codependent relationship. She would date a man, return to alcohol abuse, and gain weight. He would break up with her, and she would become depressed. I would pause my entire life to fix her temporarily. She would lose around 70 pounds, then start to pursue a new man, and we would be back to square one. I guess at that point I was hoping she would choose me. It was not really a friendship anymore. I was almost like a caretaker. Story 80. My best buddy's second wife. I am financially stable, married, and have a master's degree. But apparently I am a bad influence because I do what I want and do not understand what it means to have children. Well, yes, it is not my problem. You were the babysitter who got knocked up. Hey fucknugget, if you see this, let us go elk hunting next year. Story 81. My child is transgender. She started posting publicly anti-gay and anti-trans bigoted statements. She is also a supporter of Donald Trump. I am pretty liberal-leaning. I asked her why she posted such things online, and she said she likes provoking people, so I felt it was time to cut ties. People should not be hateful for no reason. It is childish. Story 82. It was almost a 35-year friendship, and we were in our 50s. My friend never outgrew her sexual promiscuity. She slept with friends' husbands, had 3 children by 3 different men, and struggled with alcohol and drugs. The final straw came when Annie threatened to have a mutual friend, Kelly, arrested for taking Annie's underage daughter to a licensed tattoo shop. Somehow, the artist tattooed the 14-year-old. I agree Kelly showed very poor judgment, but having her arrested would have sent her back to prison. I stood up for Kelly and told Annie that if she had Kelly arrested, I would tell every wife whose husband Annie had slept with. Story 83. She was cheated on and divorced, then took her anger and bitterness toward her former partner out on me. Story 84. We drifted apart and no longer shared anything. We grew up to become different people. Story 85. Apparently the film Groundhog Day ended the friendship of Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. Story 86. My brother's new girlfriend did not like that my wife had lunch with a mutual friend of theirs without telling her first. Over this middle school drama, she insisted my wife was toxic and abusive, and that everyone who remained friends with her was an enabler. My brother had been friends with my wife for about 5 years, and I had been on good terms with him for almost our entire lives, 25 years, but he immediately took the side of the woman he had been dating for only 6 weeks. This escalated to him telling my wife she deserved to die for being a horrible person, and he cut contact with my entire family shortly afterward because we refused to turn on her. I have not spoken with him in almost 5 years, and I still miss the person he used to be. Story 87. He married a stupid, toxic woman and sided only with her, even when she was wrong. Story 88. They promised to sell me tickets to my favorite artist, which were impossible to get. Then they decided to sell the tickets to someone else for less than I had offered, told me I would be angry, and walked away, leaving me standing there. Story 89. We had been best friends since kindergarten. He kept telling people that his wife was keeping him from their child and would not let him see the child. A few friends and I thought this was odd because it seemed out of character for his wife. Because he was our friend, we tried to help and give him advice. Slowly, we noticed discrepancies in his story. We eventually found more and more evidence that he was not telling the truth about many things and that he had been emotionally and physically abusive toward his wife and previous girlfriends. We tried to help as much as we could, but he refused to accept responsibility, ignored our advice, and was disrespectful toward us. I gave up trying to talk to him, told him how I felt, and blocked him. I still cannot believe I did not see any of the signs before. Story 90. Her borderline personality disorder kept getting worse. She claimed her heritage gave her the right to yell at me. I finally stood up for myself, and that was the end. Story 91. I wish I knew. We were co-workers and close friends for over 20 years, supporting each other and sharing secrets. Then they suddenly ghosted me and blocked me, and I have no idea why. Story 92. After more than 30 years, my former best friend and I are no longer speaking. I had seen it coming for more than a year. She had become very judgmental and mean, almost entitled and cruel. I found that talking with her had become a chore and was no longer enjoyable. We had spoken almost every day, so I do miss her, but not much. Life goes on. Story 93. One night I was supposed to meet my best friend and her boyfriend's sister at a bar, but I never met them because my best friend stopped answering her phone. She had left with a man she knew from the bar to have sex with him. After she left, her boyfriend's sister was rushed to the hospital with alcohol poisoning. Her boyfriend called me to ask where she was. When I told him I did not know, he accused me of covering for her and said he knew I knew she had cheated on him before. I told him I genuinely did not know where she was and did not know about any cheating, and he finally believed me. Hours later, my best friend arrived at the hospital covered in hickeys, and her boyfriend called to say she was safe and I did not have to look for her anymore. The next day, I met with my best friend. She denied cheating the night before or at any other time. While she was talking, a text appeared on her phone that said, "I had fun with you last night," from a guy we both knew. She quickly turned her phone over, but I could tell she knew I had seen it. After that, she started spreading rumors that I had been hooking up with her boyfriend behind her back. I never once hooked up with him or spent time alone with him, yet people believed the rumor and sided with her. He and I were labeled cheaters and she was labeled a victim. A year after I stopped being friends with her, she left him for another man, whom she later married and with whom she has a child. Story 94. Several years ago, he discovered that we had not voted for the same presidential candidate, so he ended it immediately. Story 95. I was her maid of honor. I actually declined at first because I despised her partner. I literally hated him. She wore me down, saying she could not picture anyone else beside her, so I gave in. I ended up taking over the mother role because her mother hated him too and made no qualms about it. She did not even turn up for the wedding pictures. There are awkward photos where you can tell the photographer was trying to make them meaningful while our expressions said, "What on earth are we even doing?" I got her through the wedding, the chaotic family photo session that almost no one attended except her youngest brother, and the dreadful reception where their first dance was to the theme from Sailor Moon. When she tossed the bouquet, no one caught it. I left the reception to catch the last bus home. I did not say goodbye, and I have not heard from her since. That was 26 years ago. To the best of my knowledge, she is still married to him. Story 96. Drugs. I watched her go down that path when she was younger and never said anything. I kept myself at arm's length. She had a child and cleaned up. I was so happy for her. I loved being her friend again, and it felt like the old days. Then she broke up with her fiancé, got into an ugly custody battle, had other problems, and went back to drugs. I tried to talk to her multiple times. I said all it would take was one bad line and her daughter would be stuck with her ex forever. That did not stop her. I brought up my worries about her substance abuse. She freaked out and said she was not using around her daughter and that if I thought she was, I should report her. She told me to just report her. This was after she had messaged me all night, so I knew she was high. We did not speak for about a week. Then she reached out, apologized, and said she had not been in a place to hear it but was sober now. I trusted her. About a month later we hung out and she was very high, talking and rambling for 3 hours and making us 2 hours late to the event. I knew that would be the last time I saw her. On the way home, she looked in her purse and asked me to look away for a second. I asked, "Why? So you can do drugs in my car?" She put something back in her purse and said no. It was an uncomfortable ride. She asked if we could talk about it in the morning, and I said there was no point. If she would not quit for her daughter, she would not quit for me. It has been about a month and I have not heard from her. I feel bad because she recently found out her dad has cancer, so I am sure she is spinning the narrative that I abandoned her. But another crisis was not going to make her sober up. Story 97. I realized I was the only one making contact. Out of curiosity, I stopped initiating contact to see how long it would take him to message me. That was 5 years ago. Story 98. I am really not sure. We had been close for years. We met in Los Angeles, but both came from Long Island suburbs. We were work friends, real friends, and business partners. We were so close that he was my daughter's godfather. We both relocated back to New York, years apart, and re-established our friendship. We spoke every day before cell phones. He lived in Manhattan and was there during September 11th, 2001. One day he vanished. I found out weeks later that he had been in the hospital. He never forgave me for not visiting or for not caring, but I had no idea. One of the last things he said to me was that my family and I were white trash. That was the end of our friendship. Story 99. My wife died of cancer. We were in our 30s, and most of our friends have disappeared since. Decades of friendships are gone. Story 100. I was the only one initiating contact for about a year. I stopped, and I never heard from them again. Story 101. My friend and I have been friends since 2nd grade. Earlier this year, he started pulling away from me and from another friend whom we have both known since 6th grade. We are in our early 30s now. When I noticed him pulling away, I asked what was going on, but he always said everything was okay. He ended up having a child with a woman we did not know well because he kept things very private. As of today, he and I have spoken fewer than 5 times since the beginning of the year. Before this, we spoke nearly every day for over 10 years. I miss him, but when I reached out most recently, he did not respond. Story 102. A failed murder attempt carried out through a third party still demonstrates evil and malicious intent. The defendant went through all the motions, indicating he was serious. He should receive a life sentence. Story 103. I was always there for them when their relationships ended, but they ghosted me when they became involved again. After the 3rd or 4th time, I realized it was a one-sided relationship, so I ended it. Story 104. He, a pharmacist, went on a tirade about claiming he could predict a mutual friend's miscarriage based on her diet. I told her about it because all 3 of us had been told it was a medical issue not related to diet. He told me to eat shit. She told him the same. She is still my friend. Story 105. Something about the way he treated his mother. I don't know why it bothered me so much. Story 106. He died of complications from severe alcoholism. His last months were spent in a hospital for terminally ill homeless patients. At 32 years old, he was by far the youngest resident there. He had tremors and coordination problems related to chronic traumatic encephalopathy from passing out while standing and hitting his head on the pavement several times. He had to wear a cycling helmet whenever he was not in bed and used a walker to get around. He experienced severe alcohol withdrawal and liver failure at the same time. He required alcohol to prevent withdrawal, but his liver could not tolerate it. Story 107. A lifelong friend wouldn't even bother to drive 15 minutes to be with me when my wife of 25 years died. Fuck that shitbag. Story 108. We drifted apart as we got older and began living different lives. I am single and still living at home, trying to get back on my feet. He is married with a young toddler and they live in a nice house. He is very religious and I am an atheist. He is conservative and I am liberal. We do not really have anything in common anymore. Story 109. She became very lonely during the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. She coped by trying to aggressively come on to me while my wife was 8 months pregnant. It was awful. Story 110. I had a close friend from college. We had known each other for more than 20 years. During the pandemic, our views diverged sharply. He and his partner supported former President Trump and opposed vaccination, while my family supported vaccination. Despite that, we managed to respect each other's politics. We were bubble buddies during the first year of the pandemic. Things changed once vaccines became available. We were planning a larger group trip with several families and children. This was after adults could be vaccinated but before children could. I rented a large house on a big property so people could spread out. A few days before the trip, my friend had traveled and stayed in a hotel and did not mention it. We found out because of social media posts. I asked if he would be willing to take a test for the coronavirus, not to get vaccinated, just to test because of the children involved. He refused and ultimately chose not to come on that trip. We already had another trip planned later in the summer, and he did attend that one, but the vibe was off. They did not really want to go out or participate, left a day early, and left a mess behind. We never had a blow-up or a fight, but afterward he told me he felt uncomfortable and judged even though I had invited him, spent time with him, and had him around my unvaccinated child. I told him I cared about him, was worried about his safety, and that he was still my friend. He shared an article with me by a right-wing comedian about reactions to the vaccine and the pandemic. I was not entirely sure if the article reflected his feelings, but I assumed it did. After that, I planned another trip and decided not to invite him. I did not do it out of anger, but out of a sense that things were tense and the dynamic was not working. When he found out, he was deeply offended and stopped talking to me entirely. So that was it. No big argument, just silence. I do not think either of us is a bad person. We both made choices based on what we thought was right at the time, but I still wrestle with whether this was a reasonable boundary or whether I should have handled it differently. Story 111. The man she loved since college, not her husband, got annoyed with me when I asked him for job guidance after I lost my job because I could not relocate to New York on 2 weeks' notice. She chose his side. That was in 2016. I was drinking to cope, and I have been sober for 6 years, but that also contributed. Story 112. I hired his girlfriend at my company. She was a hard worker and kept our connection low-key at first. After about a year, I hired him as well. Almost immediately after he started, she began gossiping about me to coworkers. At one point, when restrictions were lifted but people were still cautious, I slept over at their place with a couple of other friends. One of them later tested positive for the coronavirus. I had an important issue at work the next day, and because I had no symptoms, I went in. One of my employees, who was a temporary worker, messaged me on Microsoft Teams and asked why I was at work. I cut ties with her immediately. My friend of over 20 years took his girlfriend's side. As much as I cared, I was not willing to risk my career for someone who could not be trusted. Story 113. I kept getting the feeling I was more tolerated than appreciated. Then, when I hit the lowest point of depression in my life and reached out for help, they gave a polite, bare minimum response. There are a lot of self-assessing feelings that come with that, and I cannot lie. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.